Now, before I send you off into the wide world and you start making your own short films with all the information that you've learned in this course, there's just a few more helpful tips that I'd like to pass along to you. So this section I'm going to call practical tips. So the first tip is it's always a good idea to thumbnail or plan out what you're going to do before you actually do it. It's much easier to do it on pencil and paper or grease pencil, anything that you can use to help speed up the process. Now, I know I haven't shown you how to actually sequence a shot and decide where to put the camera in what order to do those shots. And that's really that was outside the scope of this course because I just wanted to really focus on the actual camera side of things. But as an extra tip, just thumbnail your ideas. And if you're the only person that needs to see those thumbnails, it only needs to make sense to you. So it doesn't matter how bad you draw, it just needs to get across into your mind what you see. And then you can replay that movie in your mind and go, aha, no, what if I put the camera here? And what if I put the camera there? That will work better. And that's always going to help you out and give you a much better result than if you just start working straight in 3D. My biggest piece of advice would be to make it easier for yourself. The tendency is that you want to show everything all at once. So you've got 4 or 5 characters in a scene, your shot or your short film goes for say 2 minutes, and then I want to show everything and everyone's moving and everyone's talking, and it makes it really, really difficult. But if you break it down into smaller parts, it's going to make it a lot easier for everybody involved, in the audience as well as you. Because if you're trying to animate 5 characters for 1 minute long, that is actually 5 minutes of animation. But if you do, say, the establishing shot where they're all in it, all the 5 characters, and then you just show the parts of what you want to show after that, then you've actually made it easier for yourself. You don't actually have to do 5 minutes of animation in that one whole short. You're just breaking it down into the smaller shots and you're only working on that specific part. This also has the added advantage of showing you or showing the audience where you want them to look. You can just focus on this character and that character rather than just everything at once. It makes it much more entertaining. So think about, when you see it in your mind, what can you cut away to a mid shot, a close-up, a cutaway, a reveal of some description, rather than just showing everything at once for the whole entire time. That is going to make it much more fun to watch, as well as making it easier to animate. Working with files. Now, you can do this in 2 different ways. You can have the one scene file with the camera floating around and jumping and cutting to it in the same scene, or you can break that up into each shot being a separate file. Now, it depends on the project, because it might make sense, or it might actually be faster to work with everything in the one file and just cut your camera from place to place. But it could also be quicker if you actually separate them out into separate files, or maybe a combination of the two. Say shot 1 and 2 are in one file, and then shot 3 and 4 are in the next file. I can't give you specifics on that because it's going to depend on the project that you're putting together. But you can actually start with a template file. So if you've got 10 shots in your short film, and you've got 3 of those shots are from a very similar location, you can actually just create one file with the camera in that location, and all your assets are in the right place, and you don't need to worry about the rest of the file or the props and whatever. Just build that one template file and then use that template for those 3 shots that you're going to use. That could be a faster way of working. It is totally fine to teleport. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this happens in real world of filming as well, but you have one shot and then you cut to the next, and those locations of the objects or the characters or whatever have shifted a little bit instantly over one frame. Now, this happens in the real world, as I said, but you can also do it in 3D. Although if you're working in the same scene, you just need to be wary of motion blur. So if you're jumping from here and there, you're going to get blur if you've set up your scene for motion blur. That's just one thing to be wary of. But that happens all the time, where you might have your rim lights or whatever, or the character facing this way, then the camera cuts and all the props and the people are in different spots. This is totally fine. As long as it looks okay on the screen, you can move and shift things around to make it look better. Don't be thinking that you always have to stick in the same physical position. It just needs to look good on the screen. And now a few more things about the actual camera movement. As I've mentioned a couple of times before, pay attention to what the camera is actually mounted on and how it moves, or it doesn't move. These are very important things, which I think I've said about 17 times in this course. It's very, very important. Now, another thing about movement, when you're moving the camera, you need to make sure that you have the nice slow ins and slows out, just like the principles of animation, where it's applicable, which is most of the time. If you're pushing a dolly camera along a track, it's going to start in the stop position and then it's going to speed up, hit its maximum speed, and then slow down. It has a person actually pushing it. It doesn't actually just instantly go fast or in a linear fashion. It slowly speeds up, gets speed, and then slowly comes to a rest. If it's stopping, that is. It might not stop. Who knows? So most of your camera moves will have a slow in and a slow out, especially for rotations as well. That's often one that people forget about. They just go in a linear fashion, unless you're doing, say, a whip pan or something like that, where you want it to be quite fast. And there's also some other exceptions to the rule. So if you're doing a camera shake or some type of special effect, then you might not have any slow out, but most of the time you will. Your camera will slow out of the position that it's moving and then slow into the new position that it's going to get to. Now, there's one more thing I want you to know about the camera movements and the slow ins and slow outs, and that is actually when you're showing the camera moving or stopping in the same shot. If you are cutting from shot to shot within your sequence and all of those camera moves have all of those camera shots have movement on them, you don't want to slow down or speed up at the start of the shot. That's going to make every shot look weird. You can actually tell where the cuts are going to happen, and this is not what you want. It's not what happens in the real world of filmmaking, because the top and the tail of the shot is always cut off in editing. When you cut to that camera, it's already moving. So how do you do that? Just make sure your tangent handles are already moving on the entrance and the exit of that shot. Now, hopefully you get the difference there between moving the camera with the slow in and the slow out and not slowing down before the cuts. There's a little bit of a distinction there. And the final piece of advice I would like to give you is that remember that when you're composing your shot and things like that, everything is just a guide. So I've mentioned the rule of thirds, which is probably the most popular one, but sometimes the rule of thirds and things, it doesn't fit into what you're trying to do. So what you can do is just make it look as good as possible. So for example, I can see here that actually my eyes aren't at the 1/3 of the way down. They should be here, right? That is 1/3 of the way down. But look at all this headspace. This headspace, it looks totally wrong. So how do I fix that? I just push it there, and that's okay. Now my mouth is along the 1/3 of the way there. So you should be looking at my mouth. It doesn't matter. So why does this look better than a perfectly composed shot? And that is because of the physical limitations of where I am. I'm in this room. The camera is over here. My actual camera doesn't have a zoom lens like the Blender camera can actually, zoom to pretty much negative and positive infinity, or zero in positive infinity. Actually, it probably doesn't. I don't know. I haven't tested that. But you know what I mean. You can zoom that camera. I can't zoom this, and I'm physically limited. So you might also be physically limited in where the characters are on the screen, and they have to be there. So you just got to make the decisions to that best suit that situation. Just remember, all of this stuff is just a guide, and make it look as good as you can.